Hi, boys and girls. I hope you're doing well. It's great to have you with us today. So this is going to be the first of four children's church services, and this is for the month of March. We have a special missions project. So this video is going to have two parts. The first one, we're going to look at a Bible story, and then the second part, we're going to look at just a regular fun story about a character named Buster. But first, I have a couple questions I want us to think about in regards to missions. The first question is, what is a missionary? The second question is, what does a missionary do? And the third question is, who was the first missionary? Well, what is a missionary? What does a missionary do? And who is the first missionary? Well, we're going to start with the third question. The first missionary, I believe, was Abraham. Now, the Bible doesn't say, Abraham, you are the first missionary, but whenever we think about what a missionary does and who a missionary is, right, we see that Abraham was a missionary. You see, this is our friend Abraham, and the story picks up where Abraham is an older person. He's not a little boy or girl in kindergarten or even in fourth grade. He's not even my age. He's like two or three times my age. He's in his 70s, 75 years old. But where do you think Abraham lived? Do you think he was from the United States or Connecticut? Do you think he was maybe from Russia or China or Australia? No, he was actually right in the middle of all of these places. So if you think about having the first missionary, this was a very good place to have the first missionary. So you see, the missionary could easily spread the gospel news up into Asia, down into Africa, and also up into Europe. So God chose Abraham partly because he was in a very good location to do missionary work. Well, this is Abraham, and he started out in a place called Ur. Ur is kind of a funny name. We don't think of places named Ur. It sounds like a sick animal, Ur. But this is where he lived. Now, Abraham, whenever he was in his 70s, he went to go live in Haran. And he went to Haran with his entire family. So this included his dad, his brothers, his nephews, his nieces, and his wife, Sarah. Well, they go to Haran, and whenever Abraham is in Haran, God actually speaks to Abraham. Could you imagine God saying your name really loudly? Abraham. Well, I think Abraham was quite shocked whenever he heard God's voice like this. Abraham thought, why is God talking to me? Well, God called Abraham to a very special mission, which is to be a missionary. So the first thing God said, there's three things that God told Abraham. The first one is, he said, I want you to go. Abraham thought, go where? Well, God said, I want you just to get up and I want you to leave. I want you to leave your home country. I want you to leave your family. So say goodbye to your dad, say goodbye to your brothers, and I want you to say goodbye to your home, your nice, comfortable home with your soft pillows and your comfy sofas. I want you to leave. Okay, thought Abraham, but where are we going to go? Well, God told Abraham, I'm not going to tell you where you're going to go. You just have to trust me. Just go and follow me. Well, Abraham thought, I don't know, that sounds a little scary, just to get up and go without knowing where I'm going to be going. But God told Abraham a second thing. Whoop. He said, I will bless you. You see, I'm going to take your name, Abraham, and I'm going to make it great. Everybody is going to know your name, Abraham. You're going to be famous, and I'm going to make you so famous that you're going to have your own nation. Yep. So I need you to leave your family, but I'm going to give you a great family, a family that's so big it becomes its own nation. Well, now that sounded pretty good, but Abraham didn't have any kids at this point. How could he have so many children and grandchildren and great grandchildren to have a nation if he didn't have any children? Well, Abraham thought, okay, I like the name about the idea of having a great name, but I don't know about this great nation. And then God told Abraham the third thing. I'm going to bless you so that you will turn around and be a blessing to other people. And that's the idea of what being a missionary is you go, you get up, you go out, you're trusting God, and then you go and you bless other people. Well, Abraham thought that it sounded good. So he took his wife Sarah, and his nephew Lot accompanied him. So the three of them, they went out. So they set out, they left. Whoop. Oh, yeah. They left Haran and they went down to Shechem. Now, in Shechem, God spoke again to Abraham. He said, look around at all of this land. I'm going to give this land to your children. Well, Abraham was so moved with joy that he thought, oh, this land is going to be so beautiful. This is where my children and my grandchildren will be, even though I don't have children yet, that he actually had a sacrifice. He built an altar and he worshiped God there. So another thing missionaries do is they build churches or they build places of worship. And we can see Abraham doing that here. He's building this place of worship. Well, after that, he went down to Bethel. And at Bethel, he was able to go up on a mountain. He was able to look over and see all these different places, all this different land that his descendants would inherit. And what does he do there? Well, he builds another altar and he worships God in Bethel and he begins to pray. The Bible says that he began to call upon the name of the Lord. And then after Bethel, he moves down to the Negev. But whenever they're in the Negev, there is a famine. There's no food anywhere. They don't have anywhere to go. So they end up marching into Egypt. That's right, Egypt with the pyramids. They go there, but the pyramids didn't exist at this point. I don't think anyway. So they go there. Now, there's something I forgot to tell you about Abraham, and that is his wife. Now, his wife was not a dorky girl. It wasn't a girl with a bunch of pimples all over her face or that smelled funny or anything like that. No, his wife was beautiful. And whenever Abraham was coming into Egypt with his wife, well, he began to be nervous. He said, my wife is so beautiful. What if the other men like my wife and they kill me so they can have my wife? So he tells Sarah, he says, I want you to pretend like you're only my sister. So tell everybody you're my sister, so that way they don't kill me. Well, Abraham and his wife, Sarah, pretending to be the sister, they show up into Egypt. Well, whenever the Pharaoh of Egypt saw Sarah, whoa, she looked beautiful to Sarah. And he looked beautiful to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh had to make Sarah his wife. Well, Pharaoh had hearts leaping out of his eyeballs. Pharaoh goes and he gets camels, donkeys, oxen, and calves. And he says, all right, Abraham, I'm going to give you all of these animals in exchange for your sister. So Sarah went to be with the Pharaoh. Well, God was not very happy with this whole thing because God loved Abraham. Abraham was God's chosen person. And now his wife was going to be the wife of Pharaoh. Well, God wasn't happy, and God sent all these viruses and plagues and afflictions and made everybody in the house of Pharaoh sick. And Pharaoh thought, what is going on? Why are we sick? So he asks Sarah, what's going on? What haven't you told me? Why are we so sick right now? Well, then Sarah says, well, actually, I'm Abraham's wife, not sister. Pharaoh was terrified. What? You're Abraham's wife, not sister? Yuck! I almost gave you a kiss. Disgusting. So then Pharaoh sent Sarah back to Abraham. And Pharaoh was so grossed out and so disturbed, he said, all right, nobody touch Abraham or Sarah. And you know what? I want you to take all of the animals, all the livestock, and I want you guys to get out of here. You're bad luck because your God is too powerful and we want you to go. So Abraham and Sarah, they took all of their animals, all their possessions, and they went out of Egypt. Now, I want us to give an evaluation to Abraham. So God told Abraham to do three things. He told him to go. Did Abraham get up and go? Oh, yeah, sure. He went from Haran to Shechem and to Bethel and to the Negev and then to Egypt. So yeah, Abraham did pretty good here. He got up and he left. What about the next one? Did God bless Abraham? Well, yeah, he blessed Abraham. He said, I'm going to give you this land. And he got all these animals. So God lived up to his end of the promise. But look at the last one. Did Abraham bless others? No, Abraham failed. He wasn't a blessing to his wife, and he wasn't a blessing to the Egyptians. He almost gave his wife away, and the Egyptians got sick. So poor Abraham. He failed at this point. But we must remember that missionaries are not perfect. All missionaries are going to be failures at some point. They're going to do naughty things. So that's okay. You can still be a missionary today because the first missionary wasn't perfect. So you don't have to be perfect. What is important is that the ultimate missionary, he was perfect. So the great great grandchild of Abraham was Jesus Christ, and he lived a perfect life. He came down from heaven to earth, the ultimate mission story, and he died on the cross so that we could have our blessing. So, as we continue to learn about the life of Abraham, we're going to see that, yeah, he was not a perfect missionary, but he points us to the perfect missionary, to Jesus Christ. So, that's the end of our story about Abraham, the first missionary. So, what is a missionary? Well, a missionary is a person who gets out and who goes. And what does a missionary do? Well, the missionary tries to bless people, and the ultimate blessing is Jesus Christ. Who is the first missionary? Well, that first missionary was Abraham, of course, but that means we can still be missionaries today. So I want you to think, how can you be a missionary today? What does that look like for you? Well, one of the mission stories that I have is Buster. Buster was called to go to a birthday party, if you remember from part one. So he had an invitation to go to his friend Tony's birthday party, but then this mysterious prince shows up and says, "You can come to the king's birthday party." And now Buster is torn between these two options. Well, Prince Edmund had given the invitation to Buster, and then he asks Buster, "Will you come to the king's party?" Well, Buster thought, "Can I at least talk to my friend Tony first?" Prince Edmund looked down at his watch. He didn't have much time, and he said, "Well, I can give you about an hour, but then I got to go and I need to know an answer right now." Well, Buster takes out his phone and he starts dialing. He calls Tony, but nobody picks up. He dials again, calls Tony, but nobody picks up. Well, Buster doesn't know what to do. Prince Edmund, he just needs to kill the time, so he takes out the newspaper. Buster keeps calling. He looks down. He only has 50 minutes. Buster decides he's going to run as fast as he can to Tony's house. So here's where Buster lives, but Tony lives all the way on the other side of town. Buster took off on his run, but after 5-10 minutes, do you know what he encountered? There was a big, angry dog that Buster had never seen before in the middle of the street. Buster was terrified of this dog. It was huge. It had muscles. It had muscles on top of muscles, and it looked angry. So Buster had to retreat. He had to run back all the way around and try to find another way to Tony's house. Buster was exhausted, but he made it to Tony's house. Buster runs up to Tony's door and he knocks, but nobody answers the door. He knocks and knocks again. He takes out his phone. He calls Tony, but nothing. There's nothing there. He looks in the window. The lights are off and nobody's home. Buster's thinking, oh, I ran all the way here and now I got to run straight back or I'm not going to make it. So Buster starts running back, but he gets to his park and Buster is depressed. What am I going to do? Go to King Gregory's party or lose my best friend? Well, Buster pulled into a park and he decided he was going to sit down on the bench and rest for just a minute. But then, off in the distance, Buster could hear something. Buster! 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 It got louder and louder. And then there was Tony. Buster, I've been looking all over for you. Why have you been looking for me? Thought Buster. But then Buster realized Tony had something in his hand. Tony had his own invitation to King Gregory's party. No way, thought Buster. Buster reached into his bag and took out his invitation. I have an invitation to King Gregory's party too. Are you going to go to the big party at the castle? Tony said, oh yeah, I'm going to the party at the castle. Well, Rocco and Buster were super happy. Both of them could go to the castle party together, and they didn't have to stay behind. So Buster was super excited, and he and Tony were going to start out on their amazing journey to go to the king's party. Well, here's a final message from Buster at the conclusion of part 2. See you next week, boys and girls. So we're going to have part 3 of Buster's big adventure, where they start the journey to go to the king's palace. Well, Buster is in a way something like Abraham. He set out, he is trying to obey God. He's not perfect, but he's on his destination to go see the great king at his party. Hope you guys enjoy the story and the lesson, and I look forward to seeing you next week.